Hello gentlemen, this is CS MGTOW. MRM Jack Barnes recorded a video recently titled Response to Alexander MGTOW from the MHRA. I'm making this response as some of his claims require quite specific rebuttal. So here we go.
Hello YouTube. I just watched a video from some guy called Alexander MGTOW. Never heard of him before, but this video was being passed around in some MRM chat rooms, and I watched it and I thought this is a perfect example of the difference between the men's human rights movement and MGTOW, and a perfect time to talk about the similarities between modern MGTOW and feminism. So here we go. Alright, this guy is saying that the MHRM has lost, basically, he's saying the MHRM has lost its way because it's not backing the social deconstruction of the things that, the social constructs that MGTOW thinks we should be working on. Marriage. Okay? Now, for everyone in the men's human rights movement, you automatically know, this is one of the first things you learn, the men's human rights movement is not about pushing society in the direction of, well, we think this is what's best for men, so we're going to push society towards that. That's what feminism did to women. You know, women shouldn't be allowed to stay at home and be a stay-at-home moms. They should have to get out there and work, and that's what feminism pushed for. The men's human rights movement is not doing that to men. We're not saying men should never get married. We're going to push to abolish marriage. We're not saying that. The men's human rights movement is about giving men choices and making those choices as legally and socially as safe as we possibly can. Okay? So if a man decides, look, I want to be single my entire life and I don't want to have a girlfriend, I'm going to be celibate. Fine, more power to you. Go for it. It's a choice. Go for it. A man wants to be single but have girlfriends. Go for it. A man wants to not get married but shack up, live with a woman. Fine, go for it. A man wants to get married. Go for it. It's our job as men's human rights activists not to narrow the list of choices a man has down to the ones we think he should make. It is our job as men's human rights activists to expand that list of choices and to make each one legally and socially safe. Now, legally safe, obviously, we're talking about marriage, divorce courts. If you're living with a woman, there's a whole different set of laws that come into place there. And you know, men who choose to remain single their entire lives, you know, they're kind of looked down on by society. Well, it's our job to convince society, not force, not the way feminists have, but just convince people, hey, you know, it's his choice. Let him do what he wants. You know, it's okay. That's our job.
Okay, I believe I'm starting to better understand what you want, Jack. You wish to make a range of choices safer for men. Here is where I strongly disagree with you and persons in the MRM who share your opinions on this matter. You see, the risk of divorce has only ever been one of the myriad of risks faced by men within a marriage, and perhaps even the smallest one. I'll explain what I mean. Even if the MRM succeeds and manages to mitigate all of the risks of divorce to zero, what about the life expectancy gap seen when men don the yoke of provider and literally work themselves to death trying to please the wife? What about the risks of cuckolding, where the man is tricked by his wife into wasting decades of his life raising another man's offspring? What about the loss of time that would otherwise be spent on hobbies or rest? What about the men who quite simply tolerate the company of women to get sex and otherwise feel just as trapped in these marriages as women do? What about the years and the money wasted raising children that might be better spent elsewhere by the men in question? What about the social isolation that occurs when men marry? You see, the government or feminism have had nothing to do with these negative outcomes. After all, feminists have never demanded that men alienate friends and family members after marriage. This just happens So how will any form of legal change impact these things? The answer is they will not. The most dangerous parts of marriage cannot be legally mitigated. They can only be avoided by not getting married. So, Jack, you also point to a number of scenarios outside of marriage, where, for example, if a man wishes to be, single and celibate, and how the MRM is supposedly, you have the back of these men. So perhaps you can explain exactly how the MRM is helping here. And I guess the issue that I'm driving at is that many of the things the MRM wishes to achieve can be achieved without the MRM cheaper, quicker, and more elegantly. For example, why wage a 30-year campaign to end no-fault divorce when wage parity will simply reduce the number of marriages and the necessity for women to seek or provide a husband, ensuring that she essentially seeks no husband at all? Why try to take on the damn near insurmountable task of persuading the entire human species to give up the idea that a young child belongs to the mother when increasing industrialization renders children a burden that gets in the way of individual productivity and workplace advancement, and the fact of government-granted old age pensions further reduces the historical role of children as helpers of parents in their dotage? Why campaign against yes means yes when simply living a celibate lifestyle gives one all of the protection one needs? Why campaign against male circumcision and in the process take on the entrenched beliefs of most of the free world who hold the practice to be some kind of a covenant with their God? Why do this when some of the more perceptive men out there are simply not having children? Why campaign for legal change when all men need is a simple, healthy dose of self-preservation and perhaps a 5-minute video by Stardust, Coltrane, Coterie MGTOW, Spetsnaz, Nico, Barbarossa, or Girl Writes What, explaining candidly the dangers of marriage and cohabitation? Why campaign against the absurdity of common law marriage, where you are de facto husband and wife after living together, when it's often cheaper and more enjoyable, as well as nowadays more socially acceptable and easier than ever for men to live alone? Perhaps the issue for the MRM is that you are wedded to the idea of getting results the hard way. Organic results which just happen to occur due to the regular flow of civilization don't count for you guys. If the battlefield is not taken 1 inch at a time from your enemy, the gains aren't real.
Now, MGTOW, or modern MGTOW. Now, here's a little tidbit for you. I'm friends with several MGTOWs, and a lot of them are starting to shun the label MGTOW because it has become so toxic and so counterproductive that, in other words, the new group of MGTOW, we all call them pigtoes. These guys are so toxic and just they've gone off the deep end, okay, to the point where they're little different than feminists. So these MGTOW are starting to shun them and shun the label MGTOW because it doesn't mean what it once did. MGTOW was just man going his own way, doing what he wants, okay?
Okay, this is interesting. When men rightly abandon marriage, fine, congratulations. When men then go back to warn other men of the dangers they are avoiding, while also refusing to fight a hopeless multi-decade PR campaign known as the MRM, these men are pigs.
Making his own path in life. And now there's this set of rules. You can't get married. You can't have kids. You got to do this. You got to do that. You can't do this. You can't do that. And these guys are going, wait a minute. What part of men going their own way do you not understand?
I feel like I'm having to explain this every single time I get into a discussion with a member of the MRM. Okay, so Jack, let me explain this again. Initially, a few men recognized the dangers of marriage. They assumed, incorrectly, as it turns out, but certainly through no malevolence, that marriage in the West, very, very specifically, they assumed Western marriage represented the sum of all dangers with respect to intimate relationships. Of course, they had issues with the divorce courts, but with regards to intimate relationships, they thought Western marriage was as bad as it gets. New individuals came along after the fact and pointed to other dangers which were just as potent, and perhaps even more so. These dangers involved moving to developing countries to marry, cohabiting with women, having children, working in stressful jobs, providing for women, and serving in the military. The fact that men who perhaps originally felt comfortable identifying as MGTOW no longer do so is simply due to the difficulty of a label describing a social phenomenon and the inability of such a label to fully represent the behavior of men from all walks of life, social groups, and experiences. A man who wants children will almost certainly find my antenatal stance extreme, as will a man who wishes to cohabit for my refusal to even date. He'll probably find that extreme. The problem seems to be from the fact that members within the MRM expect MGTOW to have a uniform code of values and goals, which MGTOW cannot, by definition.
Alright. So the similarities between MGTOW and feminism are: feminism pushed a certain set of choices onto women, and these are the only sets of choices that is acceptable for women to make. Women have to work. Women should not be married. They should not get married because marriage is slavery for women. Women should not have children because children are oppressive to women. All this sort of stuff that they've pushed onto women.
Here I'm actually in full support of feminism. Women should have to work. They can no longer be tolerated as the idle components of civilized life. Women ought not to marry, since through marriage they can and often do ruin men's lives, and the children represent a barrier to female advancement in the workplace, as well as a huge financial burden on the workhorse provider husband. Jack, saying that feminism forced these choices on women is simultaneously incorrect and shows just how little you care for male well-being, and I'm going to explain what I mean. You see, prior to the Industrial Revolution, women could only work in the home. The labor market required many skills they simply did not possess or possessed in modest amounts, such as physical strength. Along came the Industrial Revolution, and a service sector sprang up where women could and did make a contribution to the labor force. Feminism did not force women out of the home. Women's very own desire to be in control of their own financial destinies did. Feminism, as Coltrane has stated, is a reactionary movement coming to campaign for legislation after the fact. After women were already in the workplace, feminism demanded women abandon the home. After humans already had codes of morality where women were expected to nurture the young, feminism came along and helped codify this into law. Also, am I to assume that you would be happy living in a society where women are not expected to work? As a result, men would have to be beasts of burden, expected to support the parasite wife for all of his life. Frankly, I want no part in such an arrangement, neither do many men who identify themselves as MGTOW.
Okay? That is how the modern MGTOW, PICTOW, and feminism are similar. And that is why the men's human rights movement and MGTOW have very little in common. We want men to be happy with the choices that they make. If they want to get married, we want to make that as legally and socially as safe as we can for them. MGTOW wants to, no, man, you should never get married. We don't care that you want to. Don't do it. Now, part of being an MHRA is that we tell men, look, getting married right now is probably not a good idea because of the legal problems. We haven't got them fixed yet, so getting married probably isn't a good idea.
Jack, you're using lots of words but failing to convey meaning. Sure, okay, yeah, you want men to be happy with the choices they make. How will members of your group chasing Big Red down the streets, or making endless YouTube videos bickering with feminists increase male happiness. Also, nice straw man there, suggesting that MGTOW is somehow forcing men to not get married. Well, frankly, I actually don't care. And I'll just go on the record to say this. If a man wishes to get married and directly ask for my opinion, I'm going to voice it. If not, that's his life and his responsibility. Also, as I stated earlier, you cannot mitigate the greatest risks in a marriage, such as social isolation. Jack also erroneously assumes that marriage is now only a problem due to no-fault divorce, and that the MRM is somehow working valiantly to fix these problems, so you just hold back, delay getting married till no-fault divorce is repealed. 1 minute of checking the writings and behavior of men in the past shows that men have always been very, very reluctant husbands due to the expectations placed upon them in marriage and the loss of freedoms inherent in a marriage. Women in the past were less reluctant as marriage was a means to an end, one which is no longer necessary. To get by, she no longer needed to trade sex and children for protection. And she said a grand fuck you. I don't blame her. Now it's time for men to do the same. Fuck you to those who dress up slavery as choice, and a grand fuck you to those who lament the lack of real men, quote unquote.
This whole thing of destroying the nuclear family, sound familiar? Yeah, feminists have been very successful at doing that. They've tried to do it, they wanted to do it, and they have done, for the most part, they've done it. I mean, 60%, 60% of children now are born outside of wedlock? Well, see, MGTOWs want that too, because they believe society will be better off for men if marriage is destroyed. What about the guys that want marriage? Well, we don't care. They just got to deal with it. That's basically what they're saying. Like me, I got married, happily married.
At this stage, I'm wondering if Jack is simply too lazy to fact check. Now, did I hear that correctly, that feminists try to destroy the nuclear family? Oh, okay. Well, then perhaps Jack can explain away the countries such as Japan and Korea, where no important feminist movements existed, compared to, let's say, the UK and the USA, but we see a similar movement to MGTOW. We see dropping birth rates, dropping marriage rates. Jack, stop blaming feminists and accept the reality. Women and men are not natural partners. We grudgingly coexist and cooperate when life is hard, and when life is not, we occasionally meet to fuck, and then get in same-sex groups to talk about how bad the other side are. You act as if marriage and relationships are the human default. This is simply incorrect. Marriage is not traditional. The first humans who lived about, between, let's say, 5 million to 1.8 million years ago had very, very little use for marriage. Using the behavior of bonobos as the basis for how early humans would have behaved, I think we can presume that early males and females had sex with many partners. Food sharing was very, very likely the principle in exchange for sexual favors. About 23,000 years ago, humans started to grow their own food. And this really revolutionized human relations. We invented the plow, I guess, about 4,000 years ago. And that meant that productivity was essentially induced in, human relations when men and women divided their tasks. Men were stronger and less physically tied to children, so men went out and worked the land. Women stayed closer to the home and cared for children and engaged in a myriad of other chores. This is the era when marriage became, that kind of union between two people and was recognized by the community. Agriculture tied people to the land, meaning that, at the end of some 4-year period when the child was, walking and running around, neither women nor men had any inclination to wander off to find a new family. So they stayed together and they worked as a unit to feed and care for the children they produced. Real traditionalism at its very, very core for the longest part of our history is single motherhood for women, bachelorhood for men, groups of women working together to gather food for their offspring, and men doing their own thing, showing up once in a while to trade, handfuls of food for sex. And then, after getting laid, he'll just go back and hang out with the guys again. The nuclear family, as Stardust put it, once, is simply a unit of replication. Nothing more. There's nothing magical about the nuclear family. It's just a place where people have kids, and I might add, where dreams died, where hopes were cashed in for a stream of steady sex, and where the spark of male ingenuity whimpered out to the sound of crying babies and the smell of soiled nappies. Jack, feminists may have tried to destroy the nuclear family, but what a group of unattractive, overweight harridans could not achieve, the Industrial Revolution certainly could.
See, there's no place for me inside the MGTOW ideology. I don't fit in. Just like women who want to be stay-at-home mothers don't fit in.
Jack, I think that's because you're a married man, and MGTOW, at its most fundamental, is based on the idea of men refraining from marriage at a minimum. Sure, if a woman wants to be a stay-at-home mum, she can't fit into MGTOW. The men in the title ought to give that away.
An example of this is a stay-at-home father. That would not work for me. But a lot of men, that's what they want. And if that's what they want, it's my job as MHRA to make it as safe as possible for them legally and socially, if that's the choice that they want to make. Pigtoes would call this man a cuck and all these other names and shame him and belittle him for making the choice that he wants. That's the difference between Pigtoe and the MHRM. We are working towards making men happier. Pigtoe is trying to force society to do what Pigtoe wants it to do, to behave how Pigtoe wants it to behave, and a set of rules that Pigtoe wants society to follow. Pigtoe is a totalitarian ideology just like feminism, and both are fucking retarded. We've gotten to the point now, it's time for the MHRM to shun the MGTOW movement and call it what it is. It's feminism for men, forcing men into little boxes. That's all it is. And it's probably time for us to take out the trash and bend Pigtoe over our knee and give it the spanking that it deserves.
Jack, are you sure we're discussing the same thing here? MGTOW is packed with guys who just want peace, don't want to get married, and wish to have the time and the money to engage in their most cherished hobbies. Notice, for example, that Jack fails to explain how MGTOW uses force. Do we get laws changed? Do we storm buildings and tamper with fire alarms during debates? Do we try to no-platform people? Do we hold marches and manufacture fake, death threats? If not, Jack, then perhaps reconsider your position.
So, I look forward to the comment section. If you're a MGTOW, don't even fucking bother. Well, excuse me, if you're a Pigtoe, don't even fucking bother. MGTOWs, you guys, I'd love to hear from you about what's wrong with the modern MGTOW movement. Pigtoe, come on, we'd love to have you. We'd love to talk with you about it. But Pigtoes, get the fuck out. We've got no time for your backwards, ignorant, knuckle-dragging BS. It's time for society to move forward and leave the people like you and feminists behind.
One thing is becoming very, very clear when one listens to persons like Jack, and that is that the MRM has never really been aligned with MGTOW. Like the PUA community, they may share basic theories, but the similarities stop there. The MRM wants the male prisoner to have nicer looking uniforms which keep them warmer in winter. They campaign for the prisoners to perform slightly less laborious tasks and to be shackled with slightly less weighty chains, but they do not want male sovereignty. They simply wish for your slavery to hurt less. Any male prisoners who wake up to the sham and demand freedom for themselves is slammed as a pig by MRMs such as Jack. After failing to take over MGTOW and use it for its own ends, now they make attack videos. Thank you very, very much. This is CS MGTOW.